Hello, this is the Economic Systems and Institutions Section A lecture. Our prioritized standard is Economic Standard 5, and objectively we're going to compare and contrast three basic types of economic systems. Now, economic systems are the institutional frameworks that a society uses to allocate its resources to produce and distribute goods and services. So in other words, economic systems, this is actually the manner in which a society goes about answering economic questions. It's not what the answers are to the questions, but it's how they go about answering those questions. Speaking of questions, economic systems are actually the result of attempts by societies to answer the following three basic economic questions. So first question any society has to ask itself economically, what to produce? So based on the resources you have, let's say it's a tree, what are you going to produce with that tree? Mulch, canoes, houses, wooden shoes, just whatever it is. That's the first question. Second, how to produce it. So once you've determined what you want to produce, how are you physically going to go about producing that product? And the final question that'll be asked is for whom to produce, or in other words, who are we making this for? So depending on how you answer those three questions, that's going to determine what type of economic system you might have. Now, the differences in how societies answer these basic economic questions form the basis for the three basic types of economic systems. Things like wages and prices can be found in any type of economic system, but are determined in fundamentally different ways in the different types of economic systems. Also, economic systems cannot be distinguished by their economic activities, but rather in the kinds of economic institutions. So just like if a country decides we're going to fish, that doesn't tell you anything just in and of itself about what type of economic system they have. It's better to try to look at the types of institutions they might have. Now, there are three basic types of economic systems that differ in how economic decisions are made, and those include traditional, command, and market economies. To start a traditional economy, in this type, major production and distribution decisions are determined by customs and traditions. So you answer those three different questions based on what have we done in the past? What is the tradition? What is the custom? So it might what to produce. That might just be, well, we're going to farm because that's what we've always done. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it this way because that's the way we've always done it. For whom are we producing? Well, we're trying to stay alive. Now, tradition dictates who controls the factors of production. So maybe if traditionally, the elders in the community, they own everything, then that's the way it's going to be. It's just whatever the tradition might be. Also, traditional economies do not adapt quickly to change or promote rapid economic growth. Just because there is technology, if you are from a traditional economy, they are going to be using the tools they've always used. They don't adapt to change. Now, you're going to find traditional economies in rural areas of developing countries in Asia and Africa. Those are the most common places you're going to see traditional economies. Next type of economy is a command economy, sometimes called a planned economy. In a command economy, major production and distribution decisions are actually made by a central authority, aka the government. So, easy way to think of command economy, you're doing it because I'm commanding you. You must do it. There is no option. You have to do what we tell you to do. Think like Hunger Games. The government controls all the factors of production. So, any of the decisions of land, labor, capital, that is all dictated by the government. The government owns all the natural resources. They make all the labor decisions. They own all the machinery. Now, you're going to find a command economy, most notably, former Soviet Union was an excellent example of the command economy. That's not really around anymore, but places like North Korea and Cuba, you're also going to still see some command economies, where, generally speaking, the government makes most of the economic decisions still. And the third type is a market economy. And in this type, major production and distribution decisions are actually made in a decentralized manner, meaning there's no government involvement by individual households and business firms. So a household might want something, so therefore a business will produce the things that a household wants. Individuals and firms control the factors of production. So generally speaking, if there is land, if there is labor, if there is capital, that is either owned by an individual or it's owned by a business. Now, generally speaking, if you're talking about a pure market economy, the government doesn't own any of those things. An example, probably the example that we use, United States of America, is considered by most a market economy. We're going to find out we're not 100% that. But a place like Hong Kong also considered to have a market economy. Now, you're going to start to notice that we have characteristics of traditional economy. We have some characteristics of command economy because the government does control things. Not all things, but some things. And we do certainly have aspects of market economy. Now, every modern economy is actually a mixed economic system, having some features of traditional command and market economies, but the mix is actually going to vary from one country to another. There are three main categories of mixed economies, which are classified according to the degree of government control. So at one end, we're going to have capitalism. At the other complete end, we're going to have communism. And in the middle, we're going to have socialism. Capitalism, in this type, individuals own the factors of production, and production decisions are driven purely by self-interest. So when we think market, capitalism is the closest to market. Now, they're still going to have some aspects, but they're going to be the closest. The work of Scottish economist Adam Smith, who wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations in 1776, same year that we became a country, led to capitalism, as he argued an economy without government involvement was ideal. Now, Adam Smith, if you're ever on Teen Jeopardy, he is known as the father of economics. Smith claimed that without government intervention, the economy naturally corrects itself. He talked about an invisible hand of the marketplace and the forces of supply and demand, and basically said these forces basically cure all ills. If you just get out of the way, supply and demand will take care of everything else. So a common example of capitalism, United States of America is a commonly accepted example of capitalism. Now, another mixed economic system at the complete other end is communism. And in this type, the government owns the factors of production, and production decisions are made as the result of government planning. Now, sometimes communism is also called authoritarian socialism. So just the term socialism doesn't actually mean communism, but authoritarian socialism, yeah, that's communism. The work of German economist Karl Marx, with a K, with Friedrich Engels, actually wrote a book called The Communist Manifesto in 1848, which argued that capitalism allowed business owners to exploit workers. That sounds about right. Also, Marx believed that the workers, which he called the proletariat or the oppressed, would eventually violently overthrow the capitalist, which he called the bourgeoisie or the oppressors, resulting naturally in communism, which he said was a classless society where all property was owned by everyone, like sharing. So common examples of communism, former Soviet Union. A few decades ago, you could probably say China, although they have done some more market reform, so they're not as communist as they used to be. North Korea, Cuba, they're going to be more on this end. And kind of in the middle, we have socialism. While private ownership is allowed in socialism, the government owns some of the factors of production. Yet this practice is generally limited to key industries. Now, sometimes socialist countries are actually considered to be democratic socialist countries or democratic socialism, meaning we have socialism because the people want socialism. Through high taxes, the government provides many services for all citizens. So places that are considered more socialist are going to have things like universal health care, public education that goes beyond just lower grades, but also college. Now, socialism is actually considered a middle ground between capitalism and communism. Marx felt like socialism. Now, while there is some confusion about this, some people think, oh, socialism, that just means you're going to be communist. Because Karl Marx had the idea that you start capitalism, then you have a brief stay being socialist, and then you eventually become communist. Although there are many countries that are on the more socialist end of things, but they are not getting anywhere closer to communism at all. So this is kind of a happy middle ground between the two. Some common examples: Canada is considered more socialist. France is more socialist. Sweden's more socialist. Norway. As you can see, there's a lot of different places on the spectrum. All right, this concludes Economic Systems and Institutions Section A lecture. Our prioritized standard is Economic Standard 5. And objectively, now you can compare and contrast the three basic types of economic systems.